We are excited. We've been practicing. Cece and I have been practicing. And I just want to start out with just praying over us, and just opening our hearts to anticipation. Said something about curiosity. What was that? Courage of curiosity. I like that. So, Papa, we just come tonight with just children-like hearts. We just realize we don't know nothing. That when we said that we die daily, we just experience the newness of resurrection every day. Just the resurrection into the things of this day that you want to teach us, that we want to learn. And so we're those that burn to learn, that we know the learning will never end, that our entire lifetime on earth is in preparation for eternity. And so I just thank you for the wisdom tonight to develop healthy souls and spirits and minds and body and emotions so that we can interact with your greatest creation, humanity, in a new and better way. And so we just invite our spirit man today to train our soulish man today into the ways of healthiness. And so I just break even trauma off of our lives tonight that would give us false messages and things that are untrue. And we just invite your spirit to train us in new ways. And we just say over ourselves and over our tribe mates that we are healthy, wealthy, and wise, and that we are those who dive deep into the wonderfulness of how you made humanity. And so we just lean into your intention over humanity tonight, your intention on making us, your intention on your creation of us. And we just move into the value of who we are as not only your sons and daughters, but as the brothers and sisters of this end time ecclesia we call the church. And we just say that we are so grateful to be part of an apostolic prophetic community that is on the cutting edge of what you're doing globally. And so I just bless our time together tonight, and I bless our ability to learn. And I open our hearts and minds up into your spirit tonight to see new things that we've never known before. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
I wanted to start tonight with just a little snippet from Dr. Cloud. I made a little slide for it. I kind of wanted to play this little snippet from number 6 there, V. I'm just going to read this to us. He said, our brains love to run on autopilot. That's just a good opening line to just kind of know how intentional you have to be to form what we know from Dr. Carolyn Leaf, new neural pathways. In other words, your mind has the ability to just do autopilot things. And I like how he said it, which is handy for those everyday tasks and moments like brushing your teeth. You know, it's good that you're just on autopilot there. You know what I mean? And, you know, putting on that deodorant. It's just a good first step, you know, bathing, deodorant. Those are just some autopilot things we can trust in. However, he says, but when we use this default mode for things that need more thought, it can get us stuck in bad habits. Mm-hmm. And that happens when we've all had relationships from the past. And you know, one of the things that most people, when they come to One Life, it's new to them that people can actually keep their love on all the time and can actually be honoring and actually correct all the same time. You know, the part that I have found leading for this long is that people have so many bad definitions of so many things relationally. We're in avoidance mode instead of running toward something mode. And so we can just change a couple definitions then, we can begin to see God's intention for humanity in new ways. I think I'm going to preach on this on Sunday, but I just love to think about what God's intention was for things.
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a friend that would say, dinosaurs were God-sized pets. And then there's no, dogs and cats are here for human-sized pets. And there's really no purpose for dogs besides just pleasure for humanity. And so part of just realizing we can be a part of a community of people and we can actually adjust some of our old definitions and some of our old ways to actually become a healthy person, to actually become someone who lives with intention.
Mm-hmm.
Since God made us from intention, we all believe that, right? That he wasn't just sitting up there going, man, I am so bored right now. Like, and he doesn't live on the earth, so he made earth for humans, and everything he made on the planet is for our enjoyment. And so that includes people. And how many know that we want to control people? We want to control the narrative of our life, and we are hoping everybody will do what we want them to do with weird definitions, that we've made up, from a place of, our own injuries and trauma. And so anyway, he goes on to say that it's crucial to question these automatic thoughts. Say crucial to question.
Crucial to question.
Are we really thinking them through? Most of the time, they're happening without us even noticing. Take a moment to wake up your mind. Don't you love that? And take back control in those little areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you have to remember is that you have to live this life thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to begin to develop an understanding of how you think. Most people that I counsel with from the very beginning, they really don't know how they feel that much about things. And they usually feel about themselves in some random negative way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're sort of pushing their own personal narrative on you when they're talking to you. They tell you how they are. They tell you, well, everybody says I was blah, 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 and it's usually pretty negative, and so their actions line up with how they feel about, themselves. And so we're trying to change, I like to use that word narrative, about how we think about ourselves and others so that we live intentionally thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I might just send out the little clip from him.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Instead of playing it.
Yeah. That's a
Do you
good
have anything you wanted to say about that?
I do, but I think, go ahead. Are you going to read the rest of his commentary?
I
Or are you
think
going
I
to send
did.
it out? Okay.
That was it.
Okay, gotcha.
The end.
I thought the video said more than that.
Oh,
beyond
it
that.
does, but it's not translated into a text version. I'd have
Okay,
to
well
play
then
it.
let's stop there.
You're the only
That's
one that knows what it says.
I had insider information. See how that threw me off?
I could play it though, but
Okay, well, I came across a quote today that I think it goes along with what you're saying, and I think it really jumped off the page at me and really highlighted for me what I think God is doing for us with this book at this time in this season, just to frame this topic for you again in a new way, maybe from God's perspective. He's an amazing Father, and he sees a much bigger picture than we do than what's happening right now. And so I came across this. It's by somebody named D. Stuart Briscoe. He has written, I think he did a radio show or something back in the 70s or something. I don't know. He does a commentary on lots of verses in the Bible. And I was searching out a matter, and he said that the future is God's norm for his present gift of grace. The future is God's norm for his present gift of grace. He sees what our future can be and sets us free of the past so that we can grasp what he has prepared for us. And I think that's what he's doing with this process, He is setting us free of our past so that we can cling to and take a hold of the grace that he's poured out in this season to enable us to partner with his future that he already sees. That's a really powerful overview, I think. And he says, of course, our God wants to give us a future and a hope, we can prioritize the present when we focus on his future goals for us. I think what he's meaning with that is that we can properly prioritize our present day if we can understand his future goals, because we're more in line with that plumb line that we talked about for his what he's building. So he said some of us make the past the norm for the present. Right? Isn't that true? We think, well, what happened in our past is going to be the normal for right now. And so, if that's our expectation, then we won't even try to change it. It really will limit us in what we're willing to invest in to change. And others hold the present as the norm for the future. So we think this is as good as it gets. This is all I can expect of the future, is what I'm experiencing right now. But God wants us to allow his vision. Uh-oh, my computer just went to sleep. Wants us to allow his vision for the future to invade our present so that we can begin now to realize his promise. Another line he said is that God's vision is that his people would no longer pare life down to the size of false gods. And I would say that a lot of these thought patterns that we have, these beliefs that aren't his, that we now are fueling our autopilot, are, in a sense, false gods. They're things that we've decided we've exalted over what God actually said, mostly unknowingly, but they're things that we were taught. And a lot of those thoughts can become like a false god to us because we partner with them so heavily that we are unwilling to break away from them. And he's saying that God wishes that people would no longer pare their life down to accommodate what those false gods say. In other words, you're living smaller than the vision God has for you because you're basing it on what some false gods have said. And so his desire is for his majesty and righteousness, his holiness and justice to be the absolute basis or foundation of our ethics and our holy living and of all that we do. So I just thought that really resonated with me about what God's doing in this process, because false gods, as I said, are often these thoughts that we have erected and elevated even above what he says and what he's entreating us into.
That's good. Well, we're going to launch into where we left off last time. One of the things I want y'all to always remember is that God will intentionally bring things up during your daily life about things we're talking about. Kind of, that thing where they say they're listening in and, like they can hear you on your phone, when you don't even have it open, and then there's some sort of algorithm that, knows, well, that's really started with God. He knows the algorithm that you need to know to be able to, him to highlight the things that he's wanting. So don't think it's strange, when you have some opportunities for things to come up. Cece and I, she had kind of, I think you could say, gotten under a little bit over the last, we mentioned it, I think last Wednesday night a little bit. And so Monday we sat down and we kind of began to practice a few of these techniques, although we feel kind of like a novice. I like that feeling though, when I'm actually feel like I'm in the middle of learning something I don't already know. Clerics just like that because we just think we know so much, and so it's good to have the experience. Come on, of, I don't know this. And so let's practice together. And, Cece's and I practice a lot on relational dynamics so that we can kind of describe them for you in fun ways. We laugh about it mostly. Cece's like one of the funniest persons on the planet. And so it's when she kind of gets a new truth, then it really becomes a lot of humor for us. And I think I prophesied to you one time that you would write a book of funny stuff.
I think you did.
And anyway, so God's restoring that humor in her, which she's, all the girls that live with her know how funny she can be. And so we've had some enjoyment the last few days, just attempting to try these little techniques in this book that are fun. And so if you could look at it as kind of a fun, I mean, you want to know some topics to talk about at home. I mean, this is a fun, just practice on somebody, you know, and remember that everybody doesn't like to practice. And so find somebody that enjoys it, you know, so that you can actually have fun. And I'm doing something really weird. Look what I've done. I've done something strange with my computer. There it is.
There it
Did
is.
you see that? That's
I
a
saw
4-finger slide.
Oh, fancy.
I never do that.
You don't?
No, so I got lost off
I
in the
see.
epiphany. So on your handout, we're on page 3, and we're still in the first chapter, and we're starting at the big picture. That's where we ended last time. And so we're going to breeze along through here, and we'll have another little break here in just a little bit. So go for it.
Go for it. All right. So remember last time we talked about the crossroads of these conflicting thoughts. And so the big picture, she says, the good news is this. You can learn to harness the power of your conflicting thoughts and mixed up emotions to work for you instead of against you. That's really good news, isn't it? Whew. It starts when you slow yourself down. You stop, you get curious, and then you move in a brave new direction. Now, that's a simple statement, but I keep seeing it reinforced over and over. We have got to slow down. We have got to be able to slow ourselves down because it's just not in our culture, in our training, anything that's really applauded or anything to slow down and work through these things. We've got to slow down. I love that you talked about that courageous curiosity, because you have to be that courageous. You have to be curious about what's actually happening in order to move in a brave new way. And so she said, here's the thing. Tumultuous feelings and conflicting beliefs provide powerful clues to what is happening both inside you and all around you. Each feeling or belief represents a valuable clue. That's key there, is to consider it valuable. When you remove the guilt and examine the clues, a strange thing happens. You begin to see the big picture of your emotions, your reactions, your problems, your relationships, your life. But you can't get that clarity while moving on autopilot. You won't get it. You will not get it on autopilot. You have to learn to mind your mind. That's another great phrase. I think I might want to pull out some catchphrases or something, terminology that she uses in this book that is so helpful. Mind your mind. Are you minding your mind today? Ask a friend. So it says that that's not a skill that's taught very often, and it takes, we underline this on the handout too, awareness and attunement, spaciousness, curiosity, tenacity, intentionality, prayer, and rationality. And this is actually a much more of a spiritual process, as you'll see and we go into the next chapter. But it is a very spiritual process that we're talking about doing here. And you'll see that how it was God's plan for you to be able to look at yourself and your thoughts in this way, and the enemy knows exactly how to keep you from doing it too.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I've been kind of working with the men that are on the Bride Tribe text, and I know all you women are thankful. And like I said, well, she's the only thankful woman. But in reality, I have found this to be true. When we don't know what to focus on, we waste our time focusing on a whole bunch of things. And so then when someone comes and says, hey, refocus, we try to bring all the stuff that's random that we've been focusing on and all the new stuff, and we try to act like that's really overwhelming, when really the whole time is what she's saying, that God's trying to separate what's really the unnecessary, wasteful time, doing all kinds of random things to present our package like we have the answers, when that's so time consuming. It's so much easier to say, I look at it like this. If I was going to build something and I'd never built it before, since I'm a builder of lives and a builder of buildings, that's what I do, then if I don't know how to do something, seeking counsel saves so much time. just the
Mhm.
whole trial and error, which I'm not opposed to that either. I do a lot of trial and error, but trust me, usually the trial and error process produces error. And so that means there'll be a redo. But it's really important to know which thing to invest in. And I think that's what happens a lot, that we've invested in a lot of time wasting activities. And so then when God comes in and says, hey, here's everything he presents to us is more simple.
Yeah.
The battle is because you're trying to hang on to both worlds. And that's why there is just a lot of confusion, is because we're trying to hang on to both things. And so
Yeah.
I like what she's saying, is that it's a skill,
Mhm.
and you just weren't taught it. You weren't taught that you can actually decide what to think. In the little video from Dr. Cloud, he was saying that you have all of these random thoughts that are really negative, and where did they come from?
Mhm.
And he says, once that you're thinking them, they're yours, even if they didn't come from you.
Right.
Once they're in your mind and you're thinking them, now they're your thoughts. Now you have to decide whether you want to keep them or not.
Mhm.
And, the more, the Bible talks about taking every thought captive, that beginning work of doing that can feel exhausting. And some of you don't even want to think about what you're thinking about, aren't even thinking it's important. But if you ever decide it's important, those first steps are exhausting, because you don't even know which ones to believe, or which ones are true, or which ones are positive, or which ones are negative. But just the process of beginning to look at it will develop a muscle, and that muscle will you become more attuned to what you need and what you really think, and it'll begin to restore your emotions, and your needs will begin to become more defined. I know when I first met Cece, she knew how she felt a lot, but she didn't know what she needed a lot.
Mhm.
And so I'd be like, well, what do you need here? How many know what that feels like? I can tell you all day long something I feel, but I don't know what I need. I don't even know if I should need it. I don't even know if I should feel this. They should write a book. I don't know if I should feel.
Oh my gosh.
And so, it takes time. It took time. And it still takes time for her to define what would be the answer to the need that she has, because just throwing something at it, and especially just throwing an extrovert solution at it, I can trust you. I mean, trust me, it doesn't work for
Mhm.
her. And so we've just learned this process of trying to develop words for it, for the value. So that's really what she's talking about, is that you're minding your mind. You're actually intentionally trying to think about what you're
Right.
thinking about.
Right.
And this process, trust me, if you'll do it, it's not going to last forever. It's the bucking it and deciding, oh, well, I'm not going to do it. And then everybody else is doing it, and you're the only one not doing it. And so then everybody's like, hey, have you been thinking about your thinking? Well, no, I didn't have time to think about what I was thinking about, because I was thinking about something else. And it's that whole thing he's trying to change in us so that we can be more aware.
That's right. That's so good. I love the analogy that she gives next about thinking about a puzzle, a literal puzzle. And, we have a little table at our house with a puzzle on it, but it doesn't get put together by just walking by it and seeing it there. I don't know how many times I've sat down there, maybe 2. But, Sidwo sits down like all the time. She's always sitting down there and working on that puzzle, and then it gets finished. But just looking at all the pieces scattered around the table, you don't get anywhere with that. You have to intentionally sit down and try to look at them. And so that's a great analogy. She says that each tiny piece of that puzzle is essential, right? I mean, if you've ever gotten to the end of a puzzle and you realize you're missing some pieces, that's so aggravating, isn't it? So each piece is very important. It's essential to the picture, every single piece. And so you can think about your thoughts and your feelings as being the same. Yeah. Looking at each piece, having that piece for the part of the puzzle is essential. But each tiny piece is also meaningless when it's disconnected from the whole picture. They look like nothing. I mean, they look like tiny pieces that are insignificant and don't matter. But when you get to that point where you're starting to see the big picture, you need that piece. And so the same is true for your feelings and thoughts, and even some of the half-baked truths that other people have been telling you. So each piece represents one tiny part of the whole picture. And when you take the time you need to notice, observe, and organize the different fragments in your mind, a clear picture emerges, one that brings peace out of the pieces. Isn't that a good line? Oh, I like that one too. Peace out of the pieces. But as I said, we have to be willing to sit at the table. You can't just walk by and think, oh, that's 1,000 pieces. That's going to take forever, and keep walking. You can't do that. You have to be willing to sit down. So each tiny piece will actually guide your way out of chaos. And so she gives some examples. You might say, I'm frustrated. I'm not entirely ungrateful. Part of me loves the life I have. Some things are okay. A lot of me feels misunderstood. Some things are hard. I don't like feeling that way. I do feel this way. So just recognizing and acknowledging the different pieces. And as you attune to the different truth pieces living inside you, you unleash the most powerful strategy yet. You start aligning yourself with reality.
So good.
And if, like we always say, you can't be healed of what you won't admit, you can't be healed of what you don't recognize is reality. If you're unwilling to look at the reality of your mind and weigh the war and the chaos that's going on inside there, you won't get the healing that you need. And so you have to really tune in and gaze unflinchingly at the truth and start naming things honestly. You stop pretending and you stop trying to gaslight yourself into believing things aren't what they really are. I love this line. You stop putting a whole lot of energy into manipulating yourself into feeling great. Man, I hate being manipulated. Like we usually think about manipulation in terms of what other people are doing to us. And we hate it, right? It makes us mad. We have big reactions. We don't like it at all, right? But we are really doing that to ourselves. And if we would recognize that that's what it is, we're just trying to manipulate ourselves because we're not actually stopping to acknowledge the different pieces of the puzzle in that moment. And that's we sadly have called that self-discipline in the past, manipulating yourself into feeling and doing what you're supposed to do. That's that behavior modification without real internal change. It's just, you're just manipulating yourself. That doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound good at all. So we want to stop trying to bury the complicated blend of, lost my place there, of love, gratitude, and resentment that exists simultaneously within you. I mean, how often do you hear that? I am feeling so full of love and I'm so grateful and I'm also resentful. Who says that in a conversation? No, we leave off the resentful part, don't we? We save that for a private whispered conversation, after everybody else has gone to bed and we're like, I'm so resentful. But why don't we get to that phase of just saying it all together? I love you and I'm grateful for all that you did for me today. I'm also very resentful of you. I mean, let's just say it. Let's just call it out like it is. It's a starting place. And so you start working with the whole truth, the fullness of truth as your greatest ally. And you use all of that complexity to your advantage. And when you do, you see an even more beautiful and more expansive picture that lies ahead of you. And I think that goes along with what that quote that I read, that we want to see the bigger picture of where God's leading us. What is he shaping in us? And as we do, instead of calling all of those thoughts that are complicated and we might feel condemned about, instead of calling that, well, that's the demonic trying to take me out, and that giving it all the credit to the enemy, maybe it's God saying, well, hey, if you let me untangle this, you would be able to partner with the vision I have for you. And so we could totally reframe how this happens for us and what those crossroad opportunities are giving us.
Yeah, I had that opportunity today with some of my love members of my house. And so, I think it's pretty easy for me to tell people how I feel about things and always reshaping our why, why we're doing this, and be able to look at heart things that people are doing. But one of the things that I think, if you will do this process with yourself, you'll be able to see what other people are really saying. And so one of the things that I have found is, since people don't often know how they feel, when you give words to your experience with them, it actually illuminates something in their own hearts that they can be like, oh, that's why I've been feeling this crappy way, because that really is down in their heart. They don't even know it sometimes. And so always remember, while we're learning these truths, that they're also going to be used in your future with other people that you're helping come out of smallness, or because we can all just get complacent so easily, or get overly focused in a wrong area so easily. But, when you begin to learn how you feel, trust me, humanity's not that different. We're not, it's so easy. Judy and I used to have this conversation all the time. It's so easy to know what someone's doing because we're not that different. We all like to think we're so super unique, but we're just not. And so when you begin to learn how you feel, then when you hear someone else saying it, you can say, hey, man, I used to have that judgment too. I can hear what you're saying. That's really judgment. Walk that down the road with me, and let me tell you what's on the other side of judgment. If you keep judging, then you can't love. You can't love and judge at the same time. And so walk that on down the road and get healing for that, and you can actually be a leader. You can actually lead someone to the waters of healing, and instead of just judging them for why they don't get it. Yeah. And so I just always wanted to remind us that this is a bigger picture than just us individually.
Absolutely.
And there's always going to be somebody looking to you for something, and there's always going to be somebody you're looking to for something. So try to remember those little glimpses that you're getting as you start this process, so that you can remember to help somebody else in the future.
Yeah, and you'll find that it will start making a difference right away in your relationships with other people, because if we're moving on to page 4, the next bullet point there says you start to make sense of yourself and the reality of your experience, and you start to make sense of the people around you. You start to make sense of your life. That means you can communicate more and actually interact with reality with people that you're doing life with too. So you'll see the impact of that pretty quickly as you start to do this. As she said, we kind of practiced on some things even without realizing what we were doing. It was sort of after the fact, we're like, oh, I think we were just started that process, and that's why this went well. And so the next bullet point says, as you begin to piece together the contents of your heart, soul, and mind without guilt, shame, or criticism, you gain clarity. Clarity gives birth to action. That's another important staple, foundational truth, is that if you are confused, you will be stuck. You don't make any movement while confused. So a lot of times, a lot of us just have become content to stay confused, to just kind of make it through. I'll just muscle my way through it, even though I'm so confused in this moment. But you'll just be stuck there. And so if you don't have clarity, you won't be able to take action. So even for that mindset, I think we said it the other day, that a lot of us are quick to move from, I feel funny, I don't like the way I'm feeling, I have a problem, so we want to jump straight to the solution. You can't do any solution. You cannot take action. As much as you might want to take action right away to try to fix it, you won't be able to without clarity. You'll just be spinning your wheels. And so clarity is essential.
That's good.
So, and she gives this great little disclaimer here that you have to pat yourself on the back, that the fact that you are aware of what you're feeling is a very important first step. So even if that's all you can do at first, to just become aware of what you're feeling, that is the beginning. And I love this next line, that part that she gave us here. She said that when Jesus described a kind of truth that sets you free, he knew what he was talking about. It's not a quick fix. It's not the easy way, but I promise you that when you slow down and gently attune to your mixed up mind, you'll discover the beauty of aligning yourself with reality. You'll piece together a fuller picture of the challenges you face. You'll stop feeling stuck and start seeing a path emerge through the haze. You'll start moving forward with conviction to create the life you crave. So important. And I had to admit, when I read that, I was like, oh, I think when I've heard that, Jesus, the truth sets us free, I thought it meant like Jesus is truth, like the right truth. I didn't realize that it actually means being just truthful will set you free. The truth, your own truth, even if it's not in alignment with God's ultimate truth, starting there will set you free. Just being truthful. And so I love that. He knew what he was talking about. It's like, oh, okay, I see it now. I see it. I see what you're saying now. The truth does set you free. And so I don't need to be afraid to admit that my truth, which is probably faulty, is in existence. It is reality. And that you have to align yourself with reality to do something about reality. If you're living in a fantasy world about the topic, any change you make is also going to be a fantasy. So if you want real change, you have to align yourself with the reality of where you're at. And I think these are just very valuable points that we so easily gloss over and give ourselves permission to not admit is a factor, because it's just become, I think, normal in society, as for all the reasons that chapter 1 covers, to ignore those. And so she moves into, this is the framework for what the rest of the next few chapters are going to be. Her approach to this process is name, frame, and brave. 3 simple steps. Name what's hard, frame your reality, brave a new path. Now, the next 3 bullet points are really crucial. Naming takes command. Like, take that into, just sit with that for a minute. Naming takes command. If you skip naming, you'll solve the wrong problems or you'll continue down the same old path. So taking command of your situation, which is what she's saying, recognizing these thoughts may have come from someone else, but they're mine now. And I have command and control over whether or not I keep them. I get to choose. So naming takes command. Framing brings perspective. If you skip framing, you'll have a clear name for something, but you'll apply the wrong solution to it. And braving takes action. If you skip braving, you'll get a little taste of clarity, but you'll never actually make a change. And that's something we've talked about up here before in counseling. A lot of people stop in the renewing of the mind process when they just finally feel better, a little bit better than what they used to feel. And so we are always encouraging people around here. We're all about, just go, just keep going. It's never going to end. It's just better and better and better. We're constantly renewing our minds. So we don't want to settle for just a little taste of clarity.
That's good. The one thing I want to just say right here is that, I know my personal nature is I just like a little bit of information and then I want to know what the final thing I'm going to have to do is. Does anybody want to just sneak up a little hand on that? Yeah. All of y'all are extroverts almost. Anyway. But I want to just encourage us to kind of stay in it, in it to win. It's what I always just say, that I want to stay in it. And my personal analogy is that, I had a lot of success in basketball when I was in high school, but I started playing basketball. It was the latest sport. I only played basketball like 4 or 5 years of my life. And so it was way down when I was older. I started playing basketball compared to other sports I played. But one of the things that I did was I did so much fundamentally. In other words, I just learned to dribble for years. I would just sit out in the driveway with 2 balls and I would just dribble for hours on end. And, eventually, obviously I learned to shoot and things. And so then I would stay after practice and I would just shoot 500 free throws every practice, because those fundamentals are what becomes the thing you don't have to think about anymore. So, when we began to run plays in basketball, I didn't have to think about whether I could dribble or pass or shoot. So then I could put my attention on running the play accurately so that the other members of my team knew where I was going to be so they could pass the ball at the place I was going to be when the play was run. Does that make sense? And so I think it's really important to remember y'all need this fundamental of naming.
Yes.
Because it's just a new way of saying something, but I think it's a new way of doing something. And so if you don't spend time actually understanding it and getting feedback from people that, I like Cece's, like I said a while ago, she's a feeler and she knows a lot of feelings. In fact, I'm going to send out a little list of just feelings. I think we did it a couple of years ago when we talked about biblical EQ, I think maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think 2 summers ago we did the biblical EQ book, and right, isn't that what it was from? And was that what it was from?
I think so.
We don't
One
care.
of those.
Anyway, and so it was this whole list of feelings, like 100 and something feelings, because we're always like weird,
Yeah.
awkward.
Like 5 words we use.
We only have 5 feeling words in our vocabulary, and so right, and so just taking the time to even explore the other choices of feelings, is one thing I do a lot, like with this handout, on the very last page, it had those lists of naming examples. And so I go through there and I'm like, well, yeah, see, I've never been abused. So I don't even have context for that. How many have never been abused? So that means look around the room. Everybody else has. So that means everybody else, that means something. I know Cece was in an abused marriage, so she was abused in the marriage, not that she was the abuser. That sounded kind of funny, didn't it? But y'all knew what I meant already. Just wanted to clarify for the strangers. And so that means that there is an experience she had that I can't relate to. And so I have to spend time looking at it through the lens of this childlike human, this feeler, childlike human, what that meant, what that felt like. So that gives me compassion for when she thinks I'm doing something that's not safe. It just has a different connotation because I can't say, yeah, I'm safe. No, to her, I'm not safe. So it doesn't matter how safe I feel because we're not talking about me. And so since I haven't been abused, I don't even know what that word means. I have no right to own it and claim it for my own. So I have to own it through her eyes. And that changes the dynamic of this naming process.
Yeah.
So then I allow her to name, like she's saying, her truth. And that's what you have to do when you're in relationship with people. Don't react to what they need by having some emotional reaction because you don't have no context for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your name.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what you're naming. And so just remembering that and learning to have a little bigger vocabulary than just we feel weird.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of the challenge is to go deeper with what we've really been, where we've been living. Because we've just kind of been, glossing over this and blowing past this step. And we spend hours and hours trying to figure out what each person means without having better language. So it really does help. And in so many ways to be able to take the time to learn what are some more ways to describe what I'm feeling, to differentiate what we're feeling. And even today we had a good example. Tisa mentioned the feeling of anxiety for her. Her first thought on that is that's a physical symptom. She's referring to a physical chest tightening. I use the word tight. She doesn't like that word. See, it's another word that we don't relate to.
Tight.
It's tight. Yeah.
Weighty.
I use tight, but
it's not tight.
Anyways, but
tight is like a belt.
Right. But when she said anxiety to me, my first point of reference for an anxious feeling is emotional in turmoil. I'm in torment. I am fearful. It's all more of a mental, emotional thing. I'm not even thinking about physical. So, that was a great example that just popped up for us today. That at first I was like, why are you saying that's physical? She's like, well, for me that it is. And so it is important to do the process of breaking it down and say, well, what does that really mean to you? And we have to do that even with ourselves sometimes, So, and as it says in here in this next bullet point, part of this process of when you start doing this, you'll discover the deep down satisfaction about what's true about yourself and your relationships. You'll tame your guilt and your fear and discover the joy of clarity and conviction. You'll gather the support you need to tackle the obstacles you face, and you move from self-sabotage into brave, confident action. and you assemble a life that radiates the fullness of your God-given potential. Isn't that right? I mean, that's what we're talking about is we're moving towards our God-given potential, not the potential that all of our conflicting thoughts and stuff say about us. And just getting clarity on them is the step towards your God-given potential. But it will make the biggest difference in being able to name when it comes to gathering support. I am another great example Tisa and I had this week. Well, maybe get further into that here in a little bit, but I took the time before I reached out to her to really better identify what I was feeling. And so that gave her adequate information to actually respond to me in the moment, rather than her having to guess and read my mind and wonder and speculate before saying, yeah, I can talk with you right now. And so it really does help streamline and give the process of looking for support, of reaching out for support, a real boost in this being able to name things. And so you'll discover the best kind of freedom, the freedom of facing your life honestly and living with intention. It's the freedom of knowing you have nothing to prove and no one to blame. The freedom of feeling valued, fulfilled, and at peace. And I'll tell you, I just had an example of this recently where I woke up feeling all these ways, just all sorts of ways. And I was trying to go to the Holy Spirit and talk with him. And I'm like, Papa, help. It was real dramatic on paper. It's dramatic inside. It's never that dramatic on the outside for me, but it was on the inside. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I wasn't getting anywhere. And finally, I don't even know how I got there, but I started my little journaling process, just changed. And I was like, well, I may not be doing it right. And I may not have it all hauled down. And I may be only doing things right 50% of the time. And maybe it's true that I'm still operating with old lies. Maybe it's true. It was just this weird moment of where I was like, you know what? Maybe it's true. There it is. There it is, God. There it is. That's just how I feel, And but the whole time prior to that, really, that's what I was hearing over and over in my mind. You're messing up. You're doing it wrong. You're really missing it. You're going to miss the mark. But none of all the words I wrote down, none of them said that at first. And so I wasn't actually dealing with reality when I even went to God to talk about it. I was more talking around it. And honestly, I didn't even get to a big solution for my feelings. It was just like, that broke off right there, because the answer was simple. It's like, oh, right, I don't have to do it perfect because of Jesus. All right, thanks, let's go, And so just acknowledging how the reality of how you feel will literally bring you freedom. You will feel different without any solutions, just acknowledging the reality of how you feel.
It's good. I think that last line there about blame is so important because, in reality, we are blaming somebody else for either not teaching us or, not being there for us or not understanding us or whatever it may be. And, when you take more ownership for how you feel and you understand how you feel more, then you remove the whole blaming part, aspect of your relationships. Mm-hmm. And how many know that whole blaming thing it doesn't go anywhere, because the other person on the other side is not going, yeah, I'm the worst person in the world. Thanks for telling me. Okay, let's hang out. It's like, it doesn't roll out that way. And blaming doesn't do anything. It's better to just say, when I'm with you, I'm feeling like this. When you do that, what are you thinking right there? Mm-hmm. And just kind of work through it to a more full understanding. So
that's really good.
Well, we're going to have a little 7-minute break till 7:30. There's some little snacks back there, and then we're going to come back and start chapter 2. Eat fast. Was that a nice 7-minute break? Beautiful. Good? Everybody good? Good stuff, right? All right, chapter 2 is just where she begins to describe the naming process. And so I just really enjoyed reading it, enjoyed looking at it from the perspective that she has. And so we're going to go ahead and launch into that and see where it leads us. Okay.
Yeah, right off the bat, I think she points out a great point about recognizing your physical cues of when you need to start this process. She says that she's learned that for herself and her own flurry of conflicting thoughts is a sign that I need to gently slow down the pace of my mind. And I think that even, I don't like to have a fast pace. Normally, my nature is like she's pretty fast paced normally, but when I have conflicting thoughts, I get ramped up. My pace quickens and quickens and quickens. And then she's even having to tell me to slow down. And normally it's the other way around. I'm like, hey, hang on a second. And so think about that in terms of recognizing these moments when you're at a crossroad. That's a signal to take a deep breath and to ease the firing of your nervous system, and that you'll need to settle into the groundedness of your body. It's a cue that the situation in front of you is complex and that you need to pay close attention so that you don't rush into an assumption that does not adequately address the reality of what's happening. In other words, it's an invitation to spend some time hanging out at the crossroads. And I love that she gives some language for it, that you can, if you're in, relationship with someone, if you're in a moment that involves other people or just to yourself, you could say, could we pause here for a moment? We need to start naming some things. And that would be incredibly helpful, I know, and help prevent a lot of conflict, I think.
Yeah. Does anybody think that they can think of something today that falls in this category that you wish you had been able to pause for a minute and think for a minute about anything? Anybody know what she's talking about? I think it's good to just kind of think about that as we're going along. That's one of the things that we did today. We just kind of, every day is filled with all kinds of events, and those events tend to push us one direction or another all day long, and our reaction to it all day long is just, we're living in this reaction mode. Does anybody know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think it's good, even while we're talking right now, to just think about a moment that you would have liked to have used this tool on. That's the goal, is that there's sometimes, it's always good to think in advance. Like I often do that. I think, okay, tonight we're going to come up here, and I start thinking about the things that are going to happen here and how I'm going to feel while I'm here, and what's on the Holy Spirit's heart here. There's sort of a little thing we can do to prep ourselves. And so it's the same way, like before you go to work tomorrow, even be thinking about, what you're fixing to engage in, so you can kind of have more of a plan, that maybe there's going to be an event that you could start this process on, and we did include that little chart, at the end, just right now, just to begin to target something you could put in the slot that you want to even begin this tool with. So just be thinking about that, because sometimes it can be really complicated, and you're not going to be able to do this with every single event, and you're still going to have some things that are harder to look at and see, but we want to keep going on with the process of learning how to start, naming them and what situations we can name.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so good. And it's good to recognize that usually this is going to come up in a complicated or painful situation. So you're not at your best. We're not talking about moments when you're so self-aware and in best self-control. We're not talking about those moments. It's the difficult ones. And so those moments can detonate a bunch of different thoughts and feelings. Detonate's a fitting word. And I love that. Yeah, exactly. This is the name of this section of the chapter is so important too, and a great reminder. Start with yourself. Start with yourself, because I think we all know it's easier to say, well, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing this, and we're not even talking about how we feel in the moment. So when you recognize you're in a complicated painful situation, things are detonating, then start with what's going on with you first. That's your starting point.
Yeah. How many think they can do that? Great. So just be thinking, going forward, you're going to get this opportunity. So don't, and it says, name what's hard.
That's right.
So you're going to get a hard
Right.
opportunity
Right.
to let this click in preliminarily. Everybody can do it after the fact. Everybody can clean up a bunch of spilled paint on the platform. However, that happened today. Look at Sue Walsh. She's like- So just that's what we're going to be thinking about, is that something hard is coming, and I've got this new tool I'm going to practice.
That's right.
So
And recognize when your nervous system gets activated, that's when you tend to react based on conditioning or those automatic responses like autopilot. So that's when they kick in.
that's right.
That's when you're prone, that's when it's going to happen, okay? Is when your nervous system starts firing like that. And I love this. This next bullet point says it's incredibly challenging to respond wisely to what's happening outside of you until you acknowledge and patiently work through the turmoil inside of you. That's a great point. And I know I'm kind of sensitive to that feeling of chaos, so even if it's just a lot of good stuff going on around me, I can start to feel overwhelmed by it. Well, if I wasn't careful, I would start being angry at the people around me doing things that felt chaotic. And it's really not about them. So I have to check myself. Well, why am I feeling bothered by chaos right now? Why is this overwhelming me? And then I have to look and see what's really going on with me. And so you can't respond appropriately to what's outside of you until you acknowledge what's going on inside of you. It says naming is a profound act of noticing, acknowledging, and validating the truth of what you're thinking and feeling at any given moment. You stop anxiously ruminating, impulsively reacting, or grasping for a solution, and start paying attention to what's happening inside your own mind. And I think several of those words there point to what our normal cycle is, that ruminating process where you just go over and over and over and over it all day long, and or you're impulsively reacting or doing, trying to find quick solutions, grasping at straws, as they say. So it's important to stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What's actually happening inside? The simple act of stopping to notice what you're thinking and feeling without criticism, judgment, or shame brings calm to the chaos inside. So pausing to notice even that it feels complicated and that it is hard. That's a great place to start. Okay, this feels complicated. You're going to have to shut off that voice that said this shouldn't be complicated or this shouldn't be hard. Because it's trying to take you out right from the beginning and say, well, this shouldn't be hard. They look like they're doing fine. They're doing this. It's so easy for them. That shouldn't be hard for me. That's where the shouldn'ts come in, right? So we've got to knock that out and say, well, I have to admit, this feels complicated to me. This feels hard to me. Doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. And so it says, you have to give yourself permission to notice what you're experiencing without shame. I love this. Another analogy, it says, naming is like dropping a pin on a map that labels the starting point of where you are. It requires patience and self-awareness. It means asking others to wait while you take your time to get it right. You can say, I'm trying to name what's going on with me. I'm not sure how to say it yet. That's a powerful one, isn't it?
That's Cece's favorite line right there.
Yeah.
She says it to me all the time. I'm
Yeah.
not for sure that I know
How to
what
say
I'm
it.
feeling
I don't
and
know how to
how
say
to
it.
say it. It's good.
Even before I read this book, I was saying that. Yeah, all the time.
She's
I
just
don't know how to
smart
say it.
that way.
Except this book recommends saying it calmer and with more confidence. I was doing something different.
Well, you were on fire.
I was on fire.
So when you're on fire, you got to put that
Yeah.
thing out.
This is a whole new version of that
All
sentence.
kinds of stuff that happens when you're on fire.
Yes. This validating version is much different. So, but I love this. One of the reasons I think this analogy takes the shame off of it, if you were looking at a map and you knew you wanted to go to the park, there's no condemnation for acknowledging where you're at now, right? You're just like, well, this is the reality of where I'm at, and that's where the park is. That's what we're doing, dropping a pin on a map that says, this is my starting point for today of this journey I want to go on. So that takes a lot of that condemnation out of it for me. So the next step of we're still on yourself, okay, is naming the precipitating event. So you start with yourself, and then you are informed by the reality of your external circumstances. So you're still not interacting with what's going on the outside yet, or trying to speak to it. You're just acknowledging it and giving it a name. So it involves accurately identifying the outer events that are precipitating an experience of inner conflict. So when you notice that you're activated, ask yourself, what happened to lead to this feeling? And I think, we've used some terminology and some quotes from Bill around here, like, where did you drop your peace? Well, what happened when that feeling came in, or you started to sense that thing? And so a lot of us around here, I think, are practiced at that, but it's an important step. What came right before this? And instead of beating yourself up for feeling what you feel, just become more aware. Something did happen. No wonder I feel this way. Again, you're going to have to keep framing this process with words that are validating to yourself. And so something did really happen does make me feel a little calmer personally, because I feel really scared when I'm feeling things intensely and I don't know why I'm feeling them. That's a scary situation. But again, slowing down to think, okay, something really did happen. Even if I think it doesn't make sense that it made me feel this way, something did precede this feeling. And so something did happen. There's a reason I feel this way. Sometimes the precipitating event does not fully explain the inner conflict that you feel. This is a great example. You might feel lonely after spending time with your closest friends. Have you ever been there where you're like, well, I shouldn't feel this way because I was just with my people. I was just hanging out with people, but I do feel lonely. Or you might feel sad after a big success. I shouldn't feel sad. This should be a victory day. That's important information. Yeah. So naming that too, just naming the fact that you feel confused by what you feel is an important step. I feel confused by what I feel. I wonder what else is going on. That's a great line. So naming is the first step toward taking command of your own destiny. Now, I think we went past it, but in the boxes there, those colorful boxes, she mentions getting some naming tools. And as Tisa already mentioned,
on page 5, the previous page.
Page 5, and then there's another section on it on page 6. Tisa already touched on it, that we're being invited into and challenged to expand our vocabulary and to give greater language to what we're feeling. So you may need some tools to help you flush that out. I tell Tisa that all the time. Like, I'm just trying to flush it out what I'm feeling. And then when I land on the actual thing, I'm like, okay, this is really it. This is the thing. And so journaling is a powerful one.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, I think how many kind of feel like they struggle with how they feel. Okay, so just remember that, Cece, I would say, just comparatively with me, I think she kind of struggles with how she feels. And so one of the things that helps her, I think, you can speak to it, but, I'll begin to say, well, when did it start? When did you start feeling this way? 1967. Well, okay, recently, where did you begin to feel this? And I'll just keep, the goal for me, if you're the person on the other side, the goal for me right then isn't to try to connect with her in some deep way. I'm only trying to help her find where the map is, what map you're using today, Cece. You know, do you see yourself on this map anywhere? Did anything happen on the map that you're on? And the more I do that with her, the more she just begins to realize I don't have another agenda. I'm not in a hurry. I have patience. I'm in it to win it. And she begins to find herself. And then when she finds herself, I can just be talking along and she'll be like, I got it. And then
Yeah.
she don't need anything else from me. Nothing else from me. Now we're not, going to go get ice cream right then. There's no, nothing. And she begins to talk about where she's at. And then that is actual true freedom. And you got to find somebody that helps you do that if you have a hard time with your feelings, because you're not going to be able to figure them out on your own. Because the only thing you know inside you is that it's just utter chaos and you don't even know what map you're on.
Yeah.
And so just remember that the process is done with someone else is actually kind of the goal for this, because you may eventually, and she does better now, I think, to know how she's feeling by herself, but not all the time. Still, she'll need some help.
Yeah, I think it just depends. Too. Yeah. One of the phrases that Tisa used with me was saying that, well, we just need to sort the laundry. That was so helpful to me, just to recognize, okay, I just feel like somebody just dropped a load of laundry on me and I need to sort, the whites from the darks and the, all that. I just need to sort the laundry and I don't have to figure it all out yet. And so that is important to frame if you go to someone with help, again, to name what you're just needing help with in that moment. And it can evolve from there, but start off even saying, well, hey, I think I need to sort the laundry. I'm not sure what I'm feeling. And then again, on the other side, if you're the friend that somebody's come to you, remember that it's not that successful just to jump right into solutions, trying to solve their problem. If they don't know what they're feeling yet, you could offer them 10,000 great solutions and that nothing will have changed because they won't even know where to put those things. And so
listening.
It's not about fixing it. We've got to really change that. And I know that's a cultural thing too. It's not a lot of people will take the time to do that. We always want to get people out of pain. We're like, well, just make it better, fix it, make it better, make it stop. And that's not really what leads to growth for anybody either. And it's not really what leads to God encounters and listening to the Holy Spirit. It's really getting in touch with reality of what's going on. And then that's really the treasure chest there. So, but in other options that she mentions here, if you don't have someone to do that with, and you can't always go to someone, there are times you have to do it yourself, and journaling is a good start there. I find I have a lot more trouble verbalizing what I'm feeling verbally. But if I start writing, then I can sort a lot of things and it may not be true for everybody. But for me, that works a lot better for me. So I will find myself hearing different words, better descriptors, flushing out what I'm actually feeling by writing. And she points out here that research shows that writing out what you're thinking and feeling increases conscious awareness and improves resilience and decreases stress, just to write out what you're feeling. And so one thing she suggests is that when you're facing a challenging situation, set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes and write out what you're thinking and feeling. Again, you don't have to wait for a giant chunk of time. You don't have to wait till the end of the day when everything is finally quiet and nobody needs you anymore and your job's done and all of that to then try to sit down and journal, because you might just be exhausted by then, So we've got to start somewhere, and you'll be amazed at how fast you can just gain some ground just by starting the process. So a timer, 10 to 15 minutes, write out what you're thinking and feeling. And as you write, pause to notice what it feels like to connect with the thoughts and feelings. And she says, if you repeat this practice over several days, you'll actually learn it'll like develop a muscle in you to automatically start doing this process. Because as we said, we want to start catching this process earlier before we've run down the road and realized we've done a bunch of stuff and put a bunch of stuff in motion and didn't even know what was going on, So journaling is a great way. And it allows you to honor raw emotions while simultaneously organizing them. I think that's a great way to say. And it brings your whole brain online. That sounds good too. And then she mentions on the next page there that you could also use a feelings wheel, or which is like we were hoping to send out this chart. Just get a list of feelings, look up some feelings, lists of feelings, a feelings wheel, and start to familiarize yourself and just look across it and say, is that what I'm feeling? What would that be like? And you might start to find some things that ping what's going on. I love, she says, artistic expression, such as drawing, painting, listening to music, even to find names for what you're experiencing could be a way to access this and further the process of naming what's going on. And she also references her Boundaries for Your Soul book, which we did here before, where we learned about the different parts of ourselves, exiles and firefighters and all that. So you might even just be familiar with, this is a firefighter right now, or I think this feels like an exile.
Yeah, and those, when we did that last year, I think all of those are online to listen to. If anybody didn't go through the Boundaries for Your Soul, it's a super great book and a great tool. But if you just want to hear the highlights, we did something like we're doing tonight last year. And so it's really good to kind of avail yourself of what she's talking about there.
It really gives some good terminology to start framing what you're experiencing and helps you further along. And then she also references Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, which I think we've also taught on at least a little bit here. Another wonderful naming tool. And then, of course, asking for a friend and just saying, I need to do some naming work. Are you available to help me?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. So remember, the experience of inner conflict is the cue. Yeah. Name what's hard. Start with yourself. Let's see. Where are we at here? Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next section. A well-fitting name. Names matter. And I feel like this is a really interesting section to recognize the power of naming something. It really is a bigger deal than what we've maybe thought. When you name something, you call it into being. Think about that. We're all made in the image of God. How did God create the world even? We're made in the image of God. So when you name something, you call it into being. You give it definition. You imbue an experience with meaning. In other words, you give it context. It's not just red. It's like, well, that was a deep red, or that was a brilliant red, or, that reminded me of the sun and over the beach. Like, you can give it more words. The more names you give to it, the more alive it becomes, the more valid it is, and the more it does define the experience that goes along with what you're trying to describe. So a well-fitting name helps to validate the reality of your experience. It does feel good to say that there is a name for this. I'm not crazy after all. This neurobiologist, Dr. Dan Siegel, teaches in his insightful book called The Whole Brain Child that we have to name it to tame it. And according to him, he says, merely assigning a name or a label to what we feel literally calms down the activity of the emotional circuitry in the right hemisphere of the brain. So it's just some more, scientific information to back up. This is a physiological process that's actually happening in your body that you can impact by doing this process. The wonder of your design is that as you identify and name your experiences, you bring order out of chaos. It's just that powerful. Just naming it brings order out of chaos. You know that you're onto something true and wise when the naming brings relief.
Yeah, that's good.
That's really good.
It reduces inner tension. You start to gain perspective. The path ahead becomes more visible. You can convey what you've named to others, facilitating greater understanding. In short, you'll experience all these following qualities, which is something we covered in one of her other books, which I'm thankful to be reminded of. And she calls it I can't remember how many is that, 7 C's, 8 C's, something like that. They all begin with the letter C. And if I remember correctly in her other book, she talks about these C words describe what you can expect of yourself, basically, in the design that God gave you, that you can live out of this place. In other words, you can live with calmness. That's what God is expected. God's expecting you to be free enough to be able to live in a place of calmness. You can live with clarity, curiosity, compassion, confidence, courage, creativity, or connectedness. And so that's just another interesting way. Those are some description words that you can measure yourself with and say, am I feeling calm? Okay, well, then I'm not in my sweet spot. Maybe there's something going on with me, and we can start looking at something and recognizing you don't have to live in turmoil. I mean, that's a big one, is that a lot of us have just grown up believing that's just life. Living and with inner turmoil and all of this chaos and confusion is just normal. And it's important to know that God didn't mean for you to live that way. God didn't mean for you to live in torment. He actually made a way for you to be free and live in a state of mind that is where you have calmness and clarity. You're curious about things. You have compassion for people. You're confident about what's going on. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have other experiences. It's not like you're supposed to, 24/7 be on target with all of these. But it's a state of mind, a state of being that you can say that's reasonable for me to expect. And if I'm not experiencing that, then that's a clue that I could do some work there and find and restore some of those things in our lives.
Yeah, I think it's good to remember that the title of this book is I Shouldn't Feel This Way. So if I'm not experiencing the things that God says He provided for, then those shoulds in life, as we all know, are very detrimental. But most of the time, it's just because we've been afraid to look at them, And I've noticed that when I look at, it's not congruent for me. If I just said, well, I just should show up here every Sunday just because, y'all expect me to, that's not going to get me very far in life. And it's the same way, well, I just shouldn't have this feeling about this thing that this person's doing or saying, just to actually look at it through the lens of one of these words, like when I use these words as a foundation for what I am to live from, then anything that gets in the way of those things, whether it be my own personal feelings or some other experience I've had, it's that same making those thoughts bow to why do I not have courage or why do I not have creativity? I like Bill talks about how all creativity comes from a place of rest. And so when we don't know how to step into rest emotionally, it's probably because we have some feelings we don't understand. And so I'm in a battle. How many know we get in a battle with our feelings and it just runs us so down a road and we're tired from battling. I propose to you, just from experience, that 90% of my own personal battles used to be with, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be feeling like this about people, or I don't have answers. I don't have this. It's just the battle stops so much when I get things in alignment. And that's really what she's talking about, is that when I understand this is sort of a great just foundational truth, these 8 C's, I want to live by them. I want to understand why I'm not having it right now and look at why I'm not. Then that I have more information to then build a foundation for my life on. And so, I think life is meant to be lived in enjoyment and connectedness. I want to stay connected. So anything that gets in the way of that, I talked with Cece and Shudi and Aaron last night because I just feel the breath of the Holy Spirit on some things in worship, and I wanted us to come together and just talk through, what was on my heart. And so, when I think about just every aspect of my life, it's about really connecting to the Father's heart for me. And so even in my emotions, if I'm hating on myself or I'm not don't have this great foundation of how he made me, then I'm really spinning my wheels doing a bunch of activities that really are not even going to be successful.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really good as we move forward in this process to realize that that's kind of his heart, that he's wanting to draw us into those. I mean, I'm glad she gave them all C names, but I would put those up in your house and say, this is what I'm wanting to have in my life as
Yeah.
a normal, not just that I just touch it every now and then, once a year. But are we having this in my home? Am I having it in my home is made up of what everybody has on the inside anyway.
Right.
And so just remembering that as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. So this next section is move toward each other, which we've already kind of touched on, but we've touched on how when you actually engage in this process of naming, you actually are, it paves the way for you to come together with other people, whether it's to get help or just do relationship and do life with. If you can name what's going on with you, other people don't have to read your mind, or you're not waiting on them to read your mind, or connect the dots on why you're acting some way. Have you ever watched somebody like that and you're like, I don't know what's going on with them, but that is odd. Well, that was odd. Now they've done 10 odd things and I don't even know what's going on. You've never had that happen? No way. Oh my gosh. Only 10 times a day, right? Yeah. So we don't have to spend our time, we don't have to go through life or relationships doing that. We can actually pause and take the time to name some things and not have to, not put other people that we are in relationship with in that position to have to interpret. And I will tell you this, I'm going to throw this in here because it's something that we've touched on, Tisa and I've touched on as she's been trying to help me, that if there's a lot of people that if you grew up in a home environment with somebody that was abusive or narcissistic or just really dominated with some unhealthy behaviors in different ways, that a lot of children grow up watching little behaviors and reactions like a hawk. And because they're trying to learn, do I need to leave the room? Like, should I stay? Do I need to go into rescuer mode? And it's all happening subconsciously. And as that child becomes an adult, you begin to watch other people like that too, especially the people you're in relationship with. And it can be a real tripping point because a lot of the times, of course, a child that's grown up that way doesn't have healthy descriptions or interpretations of looks, or plus it's probably a different person than the one you grew up with. So their look means something different than that other look, So this is a really necessary characteristic of relationships that I think would makes them a lot safer and healthier and prevents a lot of problems to even say, and if you're in a relationship with somebody who's not doing this naming thing, who's maybe not reading this book or trying to learn this, you could even just say, hey, I don't know what's going on here. Could you think about it and get back to me? Just knowing for yourself that you need clarity on what's happening for the other person, and you don't have to read their mind, and you don't have to rely on past experiences to interpret it. And then likewise, do that for yourself, for other people, and be honest and say, hey, I'm because we don't all just run to opposite corners when we're in a conflict. The whole point of this book is that we go on to autopilot and we try to just keep going. So we're actually doing life with other people in this kind of messed up state of mind, and it doesn't even make sense to people, and it can just create a bunch of turmoil in our homes and in our relationships. So instead of moving toward each other with your chaos, move toward each other with having named a couple things. Just name, even if it is just, I'm really confused right now. At least give the person that much information. And when you, it says when you name, then you can name what you're experiencing authentically. You proactively invite your loved ones to come alongside of you instead of even possibly distance themselves from you or start doing a bunch of things that don't fit for how you're feeling. Because that's another thing people will do, is they'll try to start solving your problem for you or doing something to make you feel better. And if it's not the right target, then you're just looking at them strange. Why are you doing that? That has nothing to do with what's going on with me. So you actually gain confidence when you've done this naming work. In the moment, you will feel more confident. And I would add that you will feel not just confident that you're right, but confident that you're dealing with this reality, and that means you're calmer in that moment. When you can clearly tell for yourself what's going on and you have a name for it, then you're more confident and you don't, you can enter into a challenging conversation with more resolve and a calm resolve instead of having to fight for it. That's another thing that I have experienced in the past. One of my injuries early on in life was having things being dismissed or being talked out of how I felt and that kind of thing. So if I went to say sort the laundry and I went to Tisa and say, hey, can you help me sort the laundry and do this thing? But I already felt threatened that she was going to talk me out of how I felt or tell me it was wrong or dismiss it, then I'm defensive in that whole laundry sorting. So even if she just said, well, I don't think that's it, I might say, well, yeah, it is. That's it. That's it. You have to, they can really trip you up if you are not in a confident state. I know that this is what's happening in me, or at least on some level of confidence. If you're not in this paranoid state of mind that people are going to manipulate you in that moment, then because you actually have more personal integrity, is what it says. Naming what's hard is an act of integrity. Remember, integrity means wholeness. You are more whole and a more whole person in that moment when you are aligned with the reality of what you're feeling. And so you have more integrity and you're not so fragile and you're not so volatile when you go to interact with people. So naming actually cracks open the door for the possibility of change. And finally, one of the best parts of naming is that you also get the privilege to name the good you see in other people. We're not all just about naming problems and negative things. You actually can start to see the good in other people. Naming buried goodness unlocks healing and catalyzes God-given potential. How many of y'all have experienced that in this house? We call it seeing the gold in people. Tisa is an excellent example of, even in the midst of our turmoil or our problems, she's been able to name some things, say, I see the gold in you. And that actually catalyzes, it throws fuel on the fire of saying, hey, there's actually a God-given potential in you that helps you more motivated to work through something in a healthy way. And so the act of just naming things, it's so much more powerful than we've thought. So when you name, of course, we've already covered this, it confronts reality, good and bad. You eradicate self-deception, false guilt message. You lay a solid foundation for deep, compassionate understanding of yourself and other people. You foster resilience. You nurture integrity and create a life of congruence. How many want to live a life of congruence where your thoughts and your feelings and your actions actually align? Instead of doing what you didn't want to do or feeling opposite of what you were made to do, all those things. What if you could live in a place of congruence? Is a beautiful thing. You gain the remarkable ability to discern the truth, not only about yourself, but about other people. She mentions this other tool, the MEPS check-in. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? So my understanding of this tool, which you could probably use several different ways, is that you can do this MEPS check-in before an activity or a conversation. So again, this is a tool to help you do the naming process and a little bit more deeper than what we've been doing it. Okay, so again, instead of, I just feel weird, I need some help, can you help me? It's going a little bit deeper than that. And so the MEPS thing stands for mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So it's basically saying, hey, just pause, take a minute and think, how am I doing mentally right now? And she gives some examples. This is in that purple box on your handout. Mentally, right now, I'm confused. What am I feeling in this state? Emotionally, I'm worried. Physically, check in with your physical body. Well, I'm rested. Anybody knows, right? That if you're rested, that's a big game changer versus if you're totally exhausted. And that will be a factor in any conversation or activity. And then spiritually, how are you doing spiritually? And I didn't even recognize it at first when we first looked at this, but this is addressing your three-part being, right? We're a physical body, you have a soul and a spirit. And so this is saying check in with the whole person. Check in with your whole person, not just how you feel emotionally, but these other things could be factors. So physically is, of course, your physical man. Spiritually is spirit and your spirit life. And then mentally and emotionally, that would be your mind and your emotions. And your mind, will, and emotions makes up your soul. So spiritually, one of the things that we talked about today was, it was an interesting thing when we were practicing today. We found we had some different definitions and different ways that we would even, it was a lot harder than I thought it would be, and we put it that way, to even differentiate, well, what's a mental thing versus an emotional thing? Or what's a spiritual thing versus, the physical one's the easiest one. We're probably most familiar with that. But to give it a name, it was actually a lot more challenging than we thought, because we're like, well, I just feel anxious. Anxious is a mental thing, it's an emotional thing, and for her, it's a physical thing. And so, it was a lot harder to define. You want to share any of your thoughts on doing that today?
Well, I think what I was going to say was that I'm pretty aware of my physical stamina, because I have a large stamina physically. But if I usually get up really early, and Judy and I are a lot alike with this. When 9 o'clock comes, I'm in a foggy area from 9 on, and so I think I've become aware just that when I'm physically tired, and it's not just that I've, checked out of life and, going to the nap world or whatever, but I physically know I'm tired. I know that's going to affect those other things so much. And so, we all have to discover, what we need on a physical level. Mm-hmm. But I think in order to actually build a resilient life, you have to get these things congruent together. And so I think for me, like spiritually, it's not so much just about how I feel about God. It's a lot more about how do I feel about my spiritual walk, and if I have condemnation, I knew I for a lot of years, because of the religious spirit, I grew up in a lot of spiritual condemnation. So I always fell short. So I was always measuring, did I read the word enough? Did I do what I called prayer back then enough? Did I named all these things. So then that defined my spiritual walk. And so you have to be really careful if you partner with a religious spirit, then that will affect how you feel about your spirituality. And it's the same way, physically, if I have a drive, towards something that's a wrong definition, then, if I have a drive that I've got to look a certain way physically, then I won't even know. I will always be measuring myself the same way. Well, I'm too fat, or I've ate too much. I'll always be doing these things physically that really affect the way that I feel. And so if I'm not aware of all those things, and I'm living life out of those places that are really out of balance in my mind. And that's why she's wanting us to do some exercise of, thinking. Remember, this is all about my thought life, about going into an event, thinking about where I'm at. Because if I'm, like, for instance, Cece is quality time. And so if I'm super tired, super dog tired.
Super dog. That's a good descriptor there.
Then I have to tell her my quality time is going to look a little bit. For her, it's not about proximity. for her, it's about connection because she has so many words. And so she needs to share those words. She didn't even know she had so many words. And so she wants to tell me about the book she's reading and tell me all about the characters or tell me about something that she saw or read or whatever. If I'm really, really tired, I maybe mentally can't stay with that. Well, then that affects our connection because of what that her value of connection looks like. Since I'm not quality time, we could just watch a show together and we're just hanging out and I'm jiggy with that. It feels the same to me, but it doesn't feel the same for her. And so all those things are learning, who you're hanging out with or whatever, what they need. And so I think this is a really great tool. And again, like she was saying, if you can do this ahead of time, start living life a little bit thinking, then you may not be in the weeds so much. How many know when you're in the weeds, like Brene Brown talked about that, remember, that when you're in the weeds, you're not good. You're not good. You're a step away from fully blown. And fully blown is you need a recovery period, from that, right? And so just trying to just think about it, even if we all came into service and we had done a MEP little thing before we came, then you would know, are you pre-rejected already? Are you walking in here pre-rejected? Then, there's not going to be enough people in here that can fill that thing up, all those things we can just practice with a little bit. And so I think it's fun when Cece and I tried it today. I know she want to say something right now, but when Cece and I tried it today, it was really good, because we learned a little bit more about even what our own personal language was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, she put anxiety or anxious in the physical category. So I was like, no, you can't say that. That's an emotional word,
Yeah, she was literally like, clearly we need to do this because we don't even know what these words mean. And I was like,
right.
Well, can I not
we are
have that?
proving the need for this book.
You can't have that one?
But it really is true. It's just start practicing it. You will recognize that you've been lumping yourself together. Like think about the terminology we'll do around here. A lot of times we'll say, well, how are you? I'm good. One word. You got one word, one 4-letter word is going to describe all 4 of these. Good. That's all you can say is I'm good. Is that all you know about yourself? Really? Is I'm good? There's a lot of times that's not true because then you walk out the door and you trip over something and suddenly you're not so good. And all 4 of your areas that were supposedly good suddenly crash down on the slightest little thing, right? So, I realized today that we need to even practice this without it being a complicated time. Like I was getting ready to come today and I was feeling pretty good. I would have said, I'm good. I woke up good today. That's always a good start. I got a big breakthrough yesterday. I'm doing pretty good. I feel good I'm excited about the book. We already had our worksheet done. Lots of things were good. But when I stopped and tried to practice, okay, well, how do I feel right now? Now, I'd gotten these little Holy Spirit puzzle pieces prophetically earlier today, and they activated me, and I knew I was onto something, but I wasn't there yet. I wasn't around the corner. But I'd been spending a little time kind of focusing on it. So I would have said mentally, I feel pretty focused. I feel like I'm really aiming at this thing right now. And emotionally, well, that was different than just good. It was like, well, I'm pretty excited about this. I feel emotionally excited about what I'm onto here. And physically, I had to stop and think about it. And I was like, yeah, I slept pretty good. I feel rested. My blood sugar's not acting up today. I feel pretty good. I think I said I was calm in my physical body. I was calm. I didn't have any pain or anything going on. But when I got to spiritually, I was like, okay, I think I'm nervous. Spiritually, I'm nervous because for me, and this was another place where she and I really differed, I didn't grow up even knowing I had a spirit. I didn't even know we were 3-part beings until I was over 40 years old. I wasn't raised in church. I just didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know about the spiritual realm, good or bad. I just didn't have any of that context. So as I'm learning and growing and have been for, a few years now, it's still learning to navigate trusting God. Well, I know you're speaking to me prophetically and you've activated me, but now I've got to trust you to tell me what you're saying, and so fear comes in and says, well, I might miss it, or, it's going to become too much or too confusing, or some of those thoughts. And so in terms of my spirit man in that moment, even though I felt really focused and I felt really excited and my body was doing good and not causing any distractions or anything, spiritually, I was in this tension of knowing there's something but not seeing it yet. And I honestly felt a little nervous. And so that was practicing when I felt good. I'm good. I would have said I was in my sweet spot. But knowing that, I could actually go into this evening saying, you know what, I have a fault line there where I'm already a little bit nervous. If a few other things happen that make me nervous, I might kind of tip over a little bit there. So I was self-aware to know that I already had some nervousness going on. So I really would encourage you to practice this just when you wake up in the morning, just random times throughout the day, because it is harder to pinpoint and separate things out when the confusion is already stirred up. And interestingly, I would say this, just when Tisa was practicing with one of her own examples today, spiritually, she was like a solid. She was just a solid. And I personally was observing that I would say she is spiritually a solid almost all the time. So she could be mentally exhausted or confused or overwhelmed, and she could be frustrated or super excited. She could be extremely tired or full of energy. Those other three areas can really vary. But spiritually, she has spent a lifetime establishing a really solid foundation. So she may feel different things like, I'm feeling really activated right now, or, man, this is my gifting is active. I've got so much revelations coming down the pike. There could be words like that, but she wouldn't, I don't think, have thought of what I was saying I experienced today, where all this other good stuff was happening, but I was nervous at the same time. And so where we're at on our walk, I think even is, and maybe our spiritual gift set and everything will really will determine how that aspect, some of us who are really, seers and feelers and hearers, all of it, right? There's also a real thing with spiritual warfare. There's pushback. There's lots of things that could be going on in the spirit realm that could affect you. So even if you woke up feeling good, like after last Wednesday, and we released this prophetic word and everything, I had some pushback from the enemy that was a real spirit of intimidation. Now, I felt excited. Mentally and emotionally, I was excited. I was happy with everything that had gone down last Wednesday night. But spiritually, I was kind of under an attack of this intimidating spirit. So all to say, this is a real thing. You can feel different things in all four of these categories, and they will affect. They're part of the puzzle pieces, I would say. So it's a real thing for us to look at and factor into. So I think that'll be a really powerful tool for us. So this last section has some final thoughts about becoming a namer and looking at it as a little bit of a bigger thing. Even it says a namer is a truth seeker, someone who commits unwaveringly to the process of uncovering what is true and aligning with that reality. To become a namer is to become someone who bravely confronts yourself and the complexity of your circumstances with relentless honesty. Relentless honesty. Interestingly, naming is a place of psychological and spiritual wrestling, a place where you'll need to detach from the world's deceptions and distractions. It requires the courage to face the whole of yourself, including all that's good and all that is still mending. Now, I think of when a lot of the shoulds come in, I think from those worldly deceptions and distractions. That's what worldly perceptions of what you should be or how you should be at this age or whatever, can form and frame a lot of those shoulds. And so you really are wrestling with those things. And a lot of times we will really have to recognize that I don't actually agree with the world's definition. Even if the rest of the world still is, I don't agree with that. So then I have to break partnership with that. So we're wrestling with all of those things. God is the ultimate namer, right? Who names with incredible intentionality and tender authority. I love her word choice there. As he named, he revealed his creative power, initiating a divine ordering of things. Each name called forth the unique potential and purpose of the individual person. But God also named toxicity, evil, and abuse with searing clarity. And I think that's another thing. A lot of times, we don't want to be negative. We don't want to talk bad about ourselves or about our experiences. We want to be positive. We want to be optimistic. You want to be, a champion for God, all the good stuff, right? We're happy to name and worship and proclaim all the good stuff. And we've got to recognize God in his naming also named what was toxic, what was evil, what was abuse, and he did it with a lot of clarity. And so we want to be like him, of course. We were made in his image to do just that. And as it says, as humans made in the image of God, we are also namers. Becoming a namer means becoming someone who calls forth what is good and true and beautiful in ourselves and other people. It also means bravely naming painful experiences, toxicity, and injustices. Aaron and I were having a great conversation recently about David, in the Psalms. He's a great example. He would name all the ways he felt. It would be like, oh, we're going down in the valley, and then he would go back up onto the mountaintop, and that's powerful. Yeah. That is a powerful, real example. And that was someone who the Bible says had a heart after God, and it was a great example for us to be passionate worshipers. You don't have to deny that you're going through hard things in order to be a passionate man of God after his own heart. You don't have to deny your feelings and what's going on. David was a great example. He bravely named, even as king, danced in his underwear, and he also laid down, face down, and mourned and grieved and acknowledged how scared he was and how threatened he felt at different times. So that was a biblical example of a great namer. Mm-hmm. To become a namer is to recognize the power you have to shape perceptions, influence others, and define reality. It requires humility. It's something to approach with a decent amount of fear and trembling, which I think is important. We want to become powerful namers, but remember, we are doing it with humility. Just because you've named something, you've given something a name, doesn't mean that's what someone else is going to land on in that name. And it doesn't mean that it is the cold hard truth, that the Lord above people either. It is something to be done with fear and trembling to give something a name. Naming is what frees us, and that's exactly why the enemy of all that is true and good in this world loves to keep us from naming wisely. The truth is, when you start naming, you'll bump up against the enemy of your soul, who would love to keep you stuck, deceived, and distracted. The enemy of your soul knows how effective it is to keep you from naming honestly, from harnessing the power to unleash clarity. You guys get that? Like, that is where so many people, especially Christians, have just lived such small lives and not left much of an impact because they've stayed stuck, because they didn't do this courageous process that we're launching into. And that is the only thing the enemy can do, is cause you to get locked down and stay shut and stop processing with God and all that he's made available. So it's true, you're going to bump up against the enemy when you start this process, but that's to be expected. And that doesn't mean that you're on the wrong track. That means you're on the right track. The enemy hates it when we start to untangle the truth about the problems we face, especially when we name them without shame. He loves to keep us stuck in guilt messages and rationalizations and self-deception. He loves to keep us always focused on blaming other people. If you don't become a namer. You will become someone who avoids, distracts, or worst case scenario, gaslights yourself and other people. Your conflicting feelings won't go away. You can't expect that's going to happen. Time does not just heal all wounds. Time tucks them away so they'll be right there with you 10 years down the road. Okay? They won't go away. Instead, they will roar through your mind, completely cut off from the organizing, meaning-making parts that are designed to help you navigate a life that's purposeful, clear, and brave. She uses this example. I'm so angry. Your amygdala will scream. There's no need to be angry. The guilt messaging, self-criticizing part of your brain will scold. You really shouldn't feel that way. Your mind will remain divided, and you will be at war with yourself. You'll lash out at other people or numb yourself to try to shut out the noise. And this is exactly what the enemy of your soul wants to see happening inside of you. And that's exactly why we want to empower you to fight. And that's why she has written this book. God bless her. When you cut yourself off from complicated emotions, you stay fragmented inside. But when you bring the gentle voice of naming into the chaos of your experience, you bring calm to your mind and to this life. You begin to work with instead of against the grain of your God-made design.
So good, isn't it? If just while I'm talking here at the end, if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to raise your hand. I guess we'll just do that, won't we, so I can see you. But I think it's really good, just this little list down here at the bottom. To, like I was saying earlier, I just spent some time looking at it, deciding which ones that I could feel. Obviously, it's not an unending list. She's just giving examples. And so I like it for us to be creative into what we want to figure out for ourselves and what we want to heal in ourselves and what we want to let the Holy Spirit shine his light on, so that we have a chance to have healing. And remember that, we are here to help in the process. The small groups are going to act as kind of a go-between, especially on the Thursdays and Fridays after we teach this on Wednesdays. So if you have any questions, Shudi and I are on all the small group texts, and so we can facilitate and help, bring any clarity for any of you trying to work through any of this process. If you have any questions, I just invite you to shoot it over on those small group texts. And I'm going to send out that handout, and I just really invite you to start naming, some things on there and start the process. If you get something that you can figure out that you want to look at differently, then it'll be important as we go through the next steps later that you've gotten that one process down at least. And so there's just so much courage in knowing that the way that we're feeling actually has some answers.
Yeah.
It actually has, some relatable, and one of the things, when I was married, I was married to a liar, and that wasn't his name, but but I didn't know he was lying for a long time. And so not only was he lying just with practical things, he obviously was lying about how he felt, and so that took me a lot of years to get over, because I'm not a liar. I'm a confessor, so I'm the opposite. And so I didn't understand why somebody would want to be married and hide. Like, it just still doesn't equate to me, because I'm like, well, what are you trying to get then out of this, entity, obviously. And so, I think whenever, I began to do a lot of healing in that area, I just began to look at, and understanding that some people literally don't want to be in relationship. They really, like she was saying, they might be narcissistic, or they might have some other complex, or might, have some other injury they don't want to see healing for. But at the end of the day, you just got to decide if you want healing, and there's available help. We're going to be increasing our sozo slots at the encounter room coming up because we're building obviously these more rooms, and so that'll be exciting. And so don't miss out on a chance to meet one-on-one or meet with some people that really are invested in helping you. And don't go throughout the summer and then come up in September and say, oh, I wish I'd started that with y'all.
Yeah.
Just really try to press in, because anytime that a whole house is binding together in unity to do something, there's extra grace, there's extra anointing, there's extra freedom available. And at the end of the day, you don't want to be the person that just hung out on the sidelines and actually didn't do any of the work or didn't go through any of the process, because it's just going to shine a great big light on you more than it would if you tried. And so get your trier out. Everybody get your trier out. Nudge somebody next to you real hard and say, get your trier out. And don't be somebody that just acts like it's above them or below them or around them or anything. But, we're all just here together, just trying.
That's right.
And we're tiny enough to just expose everybody. And so, when you're coming in the door, everybody can see your stuff. So you're not hiding. Go to some big church where you can hide if that's what you want. But around here, we're trying to build leaders that want to build other leaders.
Yes.
And so leaders don't want to hide because they know they'll just reproduce after like kind. So
That's
just
right.
keep
That's
that in
right.
mind. Does anybody have any, before we go home tonight, does anybody have any questions? Any extroverts that are dying to speak that need to say something? This is your chance. You sure? Okay. Shocking. All right. Well, we'll be moving onward, and y'all be practicing that. Did you have anything?
Practice. I would say just keep practicing. Don't wait for don't wait for a problem to come up to practice. Just start trying to give language to how you're feeling. Whether it's good or bad, sweet spot, not sweet spot, whatever it is, let's expand on the good, bad, weird, not weird terminology and see what we can do.
The wordsmith is going to be needing some additional words from you. Let's just pray. So, Papa, we just receive tonight just the words, and we just let them come into our hearts and just marinate in there and just soften the places of our hearts where we just feel like it hasn't been worth it, or that it's not going to change, or it doesn't matter. It's just another self-help book, and who cares? But we just release the power of your anointing to say, no, this is such a time as this, that that we can say to you, let it be unto me according to your words, that we can receive these words and we can participate, and it can be a fun community exercise for all of us to practice together on. And so I just speak courage over us tonight to be willing to just sort the laundry and see what's really in there, to be able to find the gold that's been covered up by even years and years of misdiagnoses and misnamings of our feelings and things that have gone on in our lives. And so we just release freedom from the Spirit during this season, during this summer. It's a summer season of healing. And I just bless just all of our journeys tonight in Jesus' name. Amen.